Our next speaker for the day is Judy Balan. She's familiar to us as the popular internet blogger and the author of Two Fates, The Story of My Divorce. Judy is an energetic single mother who believes in embracing life and living in the moment. But she wasn't quite like this at the age of 17. To talk about her quirky experiments and her happy ending, Judy Balan.
Whenever I tell people that I'm a writer, for some reason they start seeing people like this in their heads. So they get really impressed and they go, wow, so what do you write? And I tell them romantic comedy, and suddenly they're not all that impressed anymore because now the image in their heads has changed to this. And as we all know, romantic comedy as a genre has been taking a lot of flack for the last many, many years for being just mindless drivel, to the point that now people don't even admit that they like to read these books and watch these movies. So you can imagine the kind of reactions I get when I say, I actually write this stuff, you know? I mean, I might as well walk up to people and say, hey, a disclaimer about me, I'm kind of stupid. So, I mean, people don't understand why I'd be proud of this, but I am. Because during my bleakest moments when I thought my whole life was falling apart, I didn't turn to intellectually stimulating literature to put me out of my misery. It was books like this and movies like this that made me laugh and forget about my troubles, even if it was for just a little while. So the way I see it, if I can do this for someone else, if I can make someone forget that they're miserable, even if it's just for a couple of hours, then there's nothing shallow about that. So I love comedy. I believe in comedy. And I've been fascinated with love stories since I was about 10 years old. So romantic comedy is what I do, and it's what I love to do. But I want you to remember that, because we're going to be talking about the other thing that I love to do, which is formulating theories on how life works. But it all sort of circles back around to romantic comedy, so stay with me. Every time people ask me to say something about myself, I make sure to add these two phrases: compulsive theorist and pop culture crap intolerant. What I mean by that is, every time I come across a popular idea or theory about life that is being repeatedly recycled in pop culture, I feel this need to test it out. I need to see if it's true, if it works. And I've been doing this for years now, and most of the time I find that popular ideas, while they sound catchy and even ring true, don't usually work. So today I want to talk to you about one such popular idea which I think is hugely misleading. And the idea itself is this: if you want something out of life, you have to go after it. You have to go out and get it. You have to be proactive and persistent. You can never back down, never quit. You're probably wondering what's wrong with that. I mean, isn't that how it works? But hear me out. I think this idea has been on a constant loop in pop culture, to the point that it's now made its way into our everyday conversations. You'll often hear people say things like, take life into your own hands, or you make your own destiny. And my personal favorite, go out there and do something. I'm sure all of us have heard this at least once or twice in our lives. I mean, it's got to be the most widely circulated piece of advice that I've ever come across. And you can be complaining about anything. Your problem could be your job, your relationship, or your finances. And some well-meaning person will come along and say, hey, you can't just sit around and expect life to happen to you. You have to go out there and do something. Now, my problem is, this direction strikes me as kind of vague. I mean, it sounds like it's saying a lot, but it's actually saying nothing. Check it out. What exactly is out there? I mean, what does that mean? And what kind of instruction is do something? If you're going to be vague like that, you might as well tell me, go to platform 9 and 3/4, and then a train will come and take you to this magical castle. I mean, it makes no sense. But the fact that we don't even blink when we hear stuff like this only goes to prove how easily we absorb and internalize anything that is popular and current. So the reason I picked this particular theory is because I tested it for 10 whole years, and that experiment just blew up in my face and caused my whole life to fall apart. It all started when I was about 17 years old, and I had one very specific goal, and that was to find true love. Now, I know, I'm not proud, okay? It's really lame, and I really wish I could tell you that at 17, I was so ambitious, I wanted to find the God particle or something. But this is the embarrassing truth. I wanted to find true love. And that might sound simple enough on the surface, but I had a very clear picture of this true love in my head. And he basically had to meet 3 requirements in order to qualify. And it went something like this. Number 1, he had to look like this. Uh, you may not recognize him, but he was a 90s equivalent of one of those really good looking vampires that all the teenage girls are really into these days. Except back in the 90s, right? Girls still liked humans. So that was number 1. He had to look like that. But he also had to be more than just a pretty face. He had to be this big, strong man who could handle any and every situation. So number 3 was the most important. He had to love me, but not in a 21st century kind of way, right? Because nowadays, when I hear people say, I'm in love, what they really mean is, I like you a lot for now, but let's see where this goes. I didn't want any of that. I wanted something grand and poetic. I wanted him to be my epic love. So he had to love me like Mr. Darcy. And if you think this is some kind of joke, it wasn't. I was very serious about this. At 17, I didn't just believe that this guy, the combination of these 3 guys existed. I was actually convinced that he was out there and he was looking for me. So when I consulted pop culture, I was told that if I wanted something out of life, I had to go after it. I couldn't just sit around. I had to go out there and do something. So between 1998 and 2008, this is what I was doing with my life. I was looking for this person. And in a nutshell, it didn't go very well. I got myself into relationship after bad relationship, and with every breakup, I came really close to giving up. But then again, I consulted pop culture, and I was told if I really wanted it, I shouldn't back down. I shouldn't quit. I had to keep going after it. So I persevered. And during this time, in these 10 years, I met and fell in love with a whole range of dysfunctional individuals. And it started out pretty innocently, just your garden variety player. But my taste in men kept getting progressively worse, because this was followed by the dark phase with the badass rock star. And that was then followed by the lost phase, the misunderstood hippie. And if you think that this was the low point, you should know that I like to end with flair. So by the time I got to the end of the 10 years, I was really tired of searching. I mean, I was desperate. I was willing to look for true love anywhere. So this relationship was particularly difficult to work out because we wanted different things out of life. But, I'm just saying, I really tested that theory. I went out there and I did something. And at the end of it, I was 27, divorced, with a very young child. My daughter was less than 2 years old at that time, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, because until that point, I hadn't even given my career any thought. I had sort of lost my way into advertising, and I had stayed there for about 5.5 years, though I never really enjoyed doing it. And now at this point, I had to quit that job as well because my daughter really needed me at home. So I was in this place in my life where nothing was working. I had failed at everything. My marriage, my career. I didn't even know how to be a parent because, check it out, I was clearly damaged. And I was 27, and I realized I was pretty much a child myself. So naturally, I was beginning to feel angry and cheated, because the way I saw it, I didn't really do anything wrong. I just did whatever they told me to. I went after what I wanted, and I never backed down. It wasn't supposed to turn out this way, and yet here I was. I mean, if there was any truth in that theory, by this point I should have been riding into the sunset with, I don't know, Johnny Depp. But here I was, completely ruined. And I had become this cautionary tale. I had become this scary story that all these aunties would start telling their young daughters. If you fall in love, that's what's going to happen to you. Just look at her, check her out, look how she ended up. And so I was miserable. And I gave myself some time to wallow and, feel sorry for myself. But after that, I decided if this theory didn't work, then there has to be something else that does. And I'm going to find that. I'm going to find another way. I'm going to find another approach to life. So I didn't know where to start, though. So I asked myself, what is not popular? What is not current? And just like that, I found a copy of the Bible lying around in the house, and I thought, now that is definitely not popular. But I was also going through this agnostic phase at that time where I was beginning to question everything that I'd believed in until that point, including the existence of God. So I was skeptical, but I had to start somewhere. So I opened the Bible to a random page and I landed in the book of Psalms, which was written about 3,000 years ago. So perfect, there it was. It fit the bill. It was not popular and it was not current, it was ancient. And I started skimming through the book of Psalms and I came across verses all on the lines of, "Be still and know. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. Be quiet, have peace, be still." Everything that I read seemed to be saying just one thing: chill out, just relax, let it go, do nothing. And that sounded almost crazy in my head because I was so accustomed to the idea that there is nothing worse than doing nothing. But I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna test this theory just because it sounds so radical. And if there was any advantage to the position that I was in at this point, it was this: I had already failed at everything publicly. I had made a complete ass of myself. So there was no fear of failure, so I could try whatever I wanted. And I said, I'm gonna try this theory. And I switched to a completely different school of thought. And it was the opposite of go out there and do something. I called this radical new theory, shut up and stay put. So that's exactly what I did for the next 3 years. I stayed put. I quit my job because that's the only thing I knew I had to do. My daughter really needed me. But other than that, I didn't have any answers. Also quitting my job meant that I didn't have money. And if I didn't have money, I didn't have social life. And the money that I made from my freelance projects was just barely enough to pay the bills and take care of my daughter's preschool fee. And I had also very fashionably refused alimony because, I wanted to make a statement about being this strong, independent woman. Dumb idea, by the way. So I was just really broke at this point, and I was frustrated, and at times I came really close to getting another job, any job, just so I could afford entertainment. But then I talked to myself and I convinced myself, if I really want to give this theory a shot, I have to stay put. So I did that. And about 9 months later, I started a blog. Because I was out of options for entertainment. I couldn't afford entertainment. And writing was always something that I'd enjoyed immensely. So I turned to my blog as a way to amuse myself. And something really interesting happened because suddenly everything that I wrote came out funny. And that was really odd for me because until that point, I hadn't been a very funny person. In fact, I was guarded and often accused of being too serious. So I had to admit that this 1 year of slowing down and doing nothing had changed something on the inside. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I felt lighter and freer inside. And most of the stuff that I wrote about was about those 10 years that I spent chasing true love, except now I could actually see the humor in the situation. So 6 months down the line, the blog became popular. That's my blog, Woman and a Quarter. The quarter is my daughter. So I met a lot of interesting people through the blog, and strangers started reaching out to me. Random people would start writing to me about their relationship problems and about their marriage and stuff, and I would talk to them, and people would just generally come out and express an interest in being in my world. They just wanted to get to know me better. They wanted to be in my world, and peculiar things started happening. they'd start sending me gifts, and they'd start sending my daughter gifts. And this girl in the US, whom I've never met, she even knit me this lovely shawl, and she sent it all the way from foreign shores. It was just really peculiar. It was odd because until that point, I hadn't been that kind of a person. Nobody wanted to get to know me until this point. So it was great and overwhelming. And eventually I met a theater group through the blog, and I started writing plays. And that was one of the plays that I wrote for the Short and Sweet Festival. And finally, it was my blog readers who told me that I should try my hand at writing a full-length novel. And I took that up as an experiment. I just wanted to see where this goes, and I wrote it. And even after I wrote it, I didn't really expect it to even get published, but within 2 months of sending the manuscript out, I had a book deal. And the book didn't just get published, it became a bestseller. That's my PR agent with my book. And so the book did really well for itself, and then I went on to sign on my next book, which is due for release in a few months. And I'm also working on my third book now, and I'm working on my first movie, and I'm standing here telling you how my career worked out. Not because I went after it, not because I chased it. In fact, if you really look at the facts, I had nothing to do with my career working out at all. Because what happened to me was serendipity. It's my favorite word in the dictionary, and it basically means fortunate accident. It's when you go looking for something, but you end up finding something else, something infinitely more valuable than what you went looking for. Because check it out, what I do now is romantic comedy. And what is romantic comedy if not the pursuit of true love with all the accidents that happen along the way? Those 10 years that I spent chasing true love and having my heart pounded were reaping for me a career in romantic comedy. And there is no way I could have seen this back then. And even if somebody had told me that this is what I'd be doing, I would have probably tried to chase it. I would have tried to enroll in a course or something to learn how to write romantic comedy. And I can tell you this for a fact, no textbook and no classroom in the world can teach me romantic comedy like those 10 years that I spent living and breathing the genre. That is serendipity, and it's changed the way I approach life. Because now, when I want something out of life, I make my plans. I go after it, I give it my best shot by all means. But when things don't go according to my plan, when things blow up in my face, when things go out of my hands, I might be freaking out on the surface, but deep down, I've come to know, I've come to understand and believe that there's something much bigger than me going on here. And I've come to trust this process. If you're wondering, how can I trust serendipity? It sounds like a random occurrence. You should know that it's happened to me several times since that first incident. And I found that the more open I am to this experience, the more it happens to me. And I believe it can happen to anyone. I believe it will happen to you, but being open to that experience means not being in charge all the time. It means believing that once you fix your inner world, your circumstances will automatically fall in place. It means not looking for shortcuts and instant solutions. And it means trusting the process and sticking with it till you see the results. And I really hope, I mean, it's one of the most difficult things that I've had to do. It's not easy, but I really hope that you will give this a shot. I hope that you will test this theory for yourselves. Just take a risk with something that really matters to you and see if this experience can be yours as well. Because this one thing I can promise you, when serendipity finally happens to you, it is out of this world. It's unlike anything you've ever experienced. It's magical, and it feels exactly like being on platform 9 3/4. Thank you.